Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to another StarCraft 2 video. Now what I got for you today is another much requested video. I know I've said that in the last couple of casts as well, but the reason why a lot of you have requested this is because of the player spawning here in the top right hand corner of the map. I recently did a video where he went up against Kalazur. I'll go ahead and post a link to it down below in the description of the video, because there's no denying that this Taiwanese Protoss player plays his own strategies. And today, it is time for a best of 5. Now spawning in the top right hand corner of game number 1 on 16-bit LE and playing with the red Protoss probes. So far everything is looking pretty standard. We have none other than Has. And his opponent is spawning in the bottom left-hand corner of the map. One of my personal all-time favorite Zerg players. I've always really looked up to this player right here, just because he's so very safe and sound, and he's been around ever since I first started playing StarCraft myself back in 2010. We have none other than Nerchio. So this should be a really interesting match. So in case you missed the game against Kalazur, I don't really want to spoil it for you, but I will tell you that Has is very well known for playing unorthodox playstyles. He's very well known at playing his own game, and it makes him a very, very difficult player to read. Now, I'm curious to see how he's going to be able to match up against someone like Nerchio. So in case you're unfamiliar with Nerchio, he's perfectly capable of cheesing, and he will do so every once in a while, but he's definitely that very safe and solid Zerg player that I personally also aspire to be. It's the playstyle that I really enjoy playing myself. Basically, what his goal in most of the games is that he's going to try and defend whatever it is you throw at him, and then eventually he will try and overpower you with more Zerg stuff. Basically, he plays that very swarmy kind of style that a lot of Zerg players, myself included, really enjoy playing. But Has, I mean, you know, so far, I have to be honest, I'm looking at that production tab, I'm waiting for, like, something awkward to happen. Has, though, really does mix it up a lot, and it makes him a very tough player to read. Now, obviously, this series is starting off on 16-bit LE. It does give you a really, really easy in-base expansion to take, so maybe we're gonna be seeing something a little bit more, quote-unquote, along the standard lines of Has, but we'll see, and we'll have to keep an eye out on exactly what it is he plans on going for. We do set at Twilight Council right now. Nothing all too crazy, while the vast majority of Protoss players do prefer opening up with, of course, with the Stargate. I mean, the Stargate gives you the Oracle and the Phoenixes, and they basically just make it really, really difficult for the Zerg player to get any kind of scouting information in, and obviously, the Oracle is great for defending a third as well. There's no denying that Twilight Council openers are still very much so viable options, and judging by the fact of the a robotics facility right now going down, I think that we are going to be seeing Archon drops here in just a bit. I would expect either a Templar Archives or a Dark Shrine to come up here in just a little bit. Both are great options to just morph in those Archons, kind of depending on whether or not he wants to play that macro game. Now already though, Nerchio is going to scout out what is going on. A great timing here on the Overlord, sneaking it in at a relatively awkward angle. Most Zerg players will actually send it straight through like the center or maybe over the ramp, but not the case this time around. Now we do see the charge upgrade coming up here for Has. Usually, if you're gonna go for a charge all-in with, say, like 8 gateways, you would actually go on a single assimilator. You would go on just a single gas. So I'm quite curious to see how he's going to follow this up. Another great option, and there is now a Sentry as well, but another great option is to go for example, a bunch of Dark Templar, morph them into Archons, and then follow up the rest of your army with a whole lot of charge lots. There is now a Forge coming up as well, so this does indicate to me that with only 4 gateways, Has is planning to take a third base here in just a little bit. In the meantime, though, on the other side of the map, Nerchio playing a very normal game. Actually, he has decided to skip out the Spore Crawlers altogether, going for the lair at around the 4-minute mark. Already having that Roach Warren go up at like 3:30. That's a safety sign right there. That is actually a very quick Roach Warren. Normally, Zerg players wouldn't be getting it until about a half minute later. But look, Nerchio, not entirely sure what it is he's going up against either. He will go ahead and make that Spore Crawler just in case of Dark Templar arriving on his side of the map before he can morph in that Overseer that he will very likely go for relatively quickly. Now, I think in a straight-up macro game, it's pretty much always going to be Nerchio that wins, just because of the fact that he's got a lot more practice playing that exact playstyle. I'm honestly not all too familiar with how good Has is when it comes to playing the macro game, but what makes him so scary is that he's perfectly capable of playing that more or less like standard game, while also going for cheese at the same time, right? So he's a really difficult player to predict. Now, a couple of zealots, though, have arrived on the other side of the map. Looks like they're mostly just tasked with clearing out the creep tumors. I do think that this creep tumor's life, indeed, is also gonna be numbered. And so far, actually, Has is doing a really good job just simply containing the Zerg. And I guess I just mentioned, right, I don't really know exactly how strong Has's macro game is, just by knowing a lot of other players that like to play cheesy, and considering the fact that he's playing at the highest level, I do think that he's very good at playing the macro game as well. But I guess it looks like we will find out with that third Nexus now coming up here as well for the Protoss player. Now, I say that, but at the same time, we see an additional gateway explosion. That would make a total of 9 gateways. 9 gateways on 2 Nexus definitely indicates some sort of aggression to me. Right? You would either go for 6 and then like maybe go for the third Nexus, sometimes even 4, and then tech up to like a second robotics facility. This is totally gonna be an all-in. Has this third base been scouted? That's the real question. Nerchio doesn't know about the third Nexus yet, although he can figure it out right now with the Zergling. He sees that the third Nexus is down. He sees an Immortal as well. That's nothing all too crazy. Nerchio does not know about the insane amount of gateways right now inside of that main base. Now, there are still probes that are being produced here for Has, but he didn't take the gases in the natural, so he's definitely planning to go for a really aggressive Zealot base push. Only 2 gases here in total. This is just a classic Immortal Sentry push, right? Immortal Sentry always was a thing that Zerg players were struggling with. It's sort of fallen out of fashion, I guess, but now with these charge slots providing a lot of additional value, even with +1 melee ground upgrades here for Has, I do think he's going to be capable of dealing quite a bit of damage. Now, Nerchio is trying to snipe out whatever is trying to make his way into the natural, but the Warp Prism right now is not actually moving to the natural. Instead, is just engaging straight up near the front. A couple of these evolution chambers will come up here for Nerchio. He's gonna try and make it a little bit more difficult. Oh my god, massive corrosive biles on a lot of those sentries, but already Has did the math. He realized that he could easily eat those shots. A lot of drones are going down already, and Has is gonna continue warping in more and more of those zealots. There's no denying, though, that there are a lot of roaches out, and that this is not looking bad at all, actually, for the Zerg player. And indeed, Has realizes that as well. He decides to move to the other side once again. I think that may be due to the fact as well that Nerchio decided to run in with that small group of roaches that he had near the front of the Protoss base here for a little while already. I thought they actually made their way back home. Now, Burrow has finished up. Nerchio does realize that there's not a whole lot of scouting here available for this Protoss player just yet. A single photon cannon immediately goes down near the third base. I guess an observer will be chrono boosted out in just a little bit, but a couple more probes will find their demise over here. Now, here's the interesting part, right? Has, during all of this, was still making probes. He's now sitting at 53 workers versus only a handful of drones. At the same time, though, the majority of that Zerg army once again made their way across the map. Nerchio is going to try and see if he can potentially close out this game. He kind of needs to deal critical amounts of damage because there's really not a whole lot. Oh man, he's all of a sudden everywhere. But there's really not a whole lot of economy that this Zerg player has. Nerchio is currently following it up with more drones, so he's getting 5 more drones right now, and he's still, dealing some damage here with these roaches. That is a very solid amount of economic harassment that he managed to do, and the majority of that roach army is still out near the front, but judging by the fact that there's 3 immortals there, I mean, 3 immortals are capable of one-shotting roaches. I do think that Nerchio will have to retreat here for now. So, this is interesting. 16 probe kills? But it still puts Has in a relatively strong position. I mean, look at the amount of income right here. He's still only mining off of 2 gases, which is kind of interesting. I think that Has really wants to commit to more and more zealots because of that. But Nerchio, I mean, he's right now only at the 9-minute mark, going for the 4th hatchery already. And he's only just now going for the first missile upgrade as well. He's now going for a follow-up here too with Hydralisk, so Hydra Roach. It's going to be pretty powerful, but I don't know how Hydra Roach is going to fare against a Immortal Sentry Zealot-based army. Still, Has has not really added on any Archons or anything along those lines. He is just about to finish up the +2 Forge upgrade here as well for those Zealots. They're going to be able to slice through pretty much everything here. It will all come down to the positioning of Nerchio's army. If these Zealots get a good engagement, it's going to be extremely difficult to win this push if you are the Zerg player. That is an awful lot of Protoss. Nerchio, though, ahead as far as the supply count goes. Has needs to be careful with engaging here. Nerchio desperately really wants to finish up that +1 missile upgrade, but with the Roach Warren now going down and actually the Evo Chamber taking an awful lot of damage, I think that Nerchio is in a little bit of trouble. There we go. Roach Warren goes down, Evo Chamber goes down. We do see now a Lurker Den here coming up for our Zerg player. He's now forced to just go into Hydralisk. The longer that this goes on though, the closer Nerchio will get to maxing out, but Has is simply gonna go for another set of Warpins. He's trying to bait those Corrosive Biles, but here we go. Has is gonna engage. More and more Zealots are coming up. Solid Force Fields actually making it pretty difficult for that Zerg army to properly engage, but Has is still dealing an enormous amount of damage. Even if he's not dealing with the army, he's already dropped the opposing Zerg drone count by 20 right now. Third base ended up dying here as well, and all of a sudden, right, it looks like the Zerg army is also disappearing, and Has, against one of the most veteran players on the planet, obtains the victory here in game number 1. So game number 2 is gonna be on Redshift LE. This map is crazy. I'm really looking forward to this one. Personally, I don't play this map anymore just because I get so frustrated. There's this gold base, of course, and once the golden minerals on the right-hand side run out, you can all of a sudden access the middle part of the map really easily. I'm curious to see how this one is gonna go. Anyway, so let's talk about that game number 1, right? I feel like that was Has mostly playing to his image. The thing is, Nerchio really did not make a lot of drones. It looks like his main plan in game number 1 there was just to simply overwhelm whatever 2 to 3 base all-in Has had planned for him. But the thing was that he did go for some aggression, but then he mass recalled all of the units once he realized what it was that Nerchio was doing. And then all of a sudden, the Zerg was in a bit of an awkward position. I've been in that place many times myself. What the heck is going on here? I all of a sudden look at that minimap, I'm like, wait a second. There is a hatchery really nearby, and Has actually will figure out that this is the case. Anyways, I feel like Nerchio was in a bit of an awkward position after he made that many army units, and then he couldn't really do anything with it, right? Alright, anyways, it looks like we are already well on our way here in game number 2. Nerchio going for a interesting hatchery. The thing is, you can still mine like this, right? And obviously you can also spread creep from this location really powerfully as well. Has immediately does decide to throw up a forge. I'm not sure if that's actually defensively or offensively. Well, obviously we're talking about Has here, so it's probably offensively. This is so strange. Wait, are you kidding me? He's cannon rushing his opponent's gold base from the actual location where the gold base is supposed to be? Yeah, well, that is indeed the case. Has is gonna go for the double photon cannon. There's no way this can be stopped, right? Oh my god. Yeah, no, if you're gonna play a weird game against Has, if there's one player out there right now, right, who's got a really good grasp at playing these super strange games, I feel like it is the Taiwanese Protoss player here. So, Nerchio may have planned to maybe go for some roach aggression. The third larva will spawn here in just a little bit. Roach Warren is gonna finish in just a second as well. No Zergling speed just yet here for the Zerg player in blue. So what exactly was the plan here in the first place? I think that Nerchio may have been planning to go for a really aggressive push. But already it seems like has got this one in firm control. What exactly is the deal from this hatchery though? Well, truth be told, I mean obviously Nerchio committed to a hatchery here, right? And that's not ideal. He basically made himself a hatchery here, and then obviously he sacrificed the drone for it as well. That's 350 minerals in total. But then again, this is 400 minerals here in total for Has, right? That's 2 photon cannons and 1 pylon. Economically speaking, it's not as if Nerchio is in a really bad deficit right now. Obviously, timing-wise, he's gonna be in a bit of an awkward scenario, but he is perfectly capable right now of going for a really aggressive push. Now, Has smartly going, that's a really good move there. Smartly going for that Adept. He needs to kind of shade that one out. Losing it would actually be kind of bad, and it does look like that will be the case. Still 2 drones though, but obviously, this does mean that Nerchio is going to be able to get those roaches from that hatchery out on the map rather quickly. And actually, this is not a bad spot here for our Zerg player whatsoever, but Nerchio already going up against the player who's got that Stargate done. A shield battery and a photon cannon are going down near the front as well. He's going to have to try and break through. Obviously, with that Stargate though, it looks like the Oracle is rallied to the other side of the map, but I think with that Stargate, you can go ahead and produce, for example, something like a Void Ray very easily. Well, apparently the Oracle was rerouted right now. Oracles deal an awful lot of damage to basically everything on the ground since they ignore armor. They basically deal splash damage, so it allows them to just pop these units like flies very, very easily. And it looks like Has just barely does not have enough energy to kill that final Ravager. And sure, that's 8 probes here in total, but actually, I think actually that was a pretty decent amount of damage. This is an awkward game already, right? And whenever it's an awkward game, I tend to favor Has. Oh my god, he made a gold base, of course. He made that gold base earlier, now transferring the drones over there. Now, Nerchio did decide to go for a couple of additional roaches that he did not move across the map. Very high-level decision-making actually there by him. If I was him, I probably would have tried to push up the ramp there too, but instead he used them to shield away against that relatively vulnerable gold base here from Has. Second Oracle now coming out. Really though, like playing this strange game against Has seems like, look at that. Right? Who the heck scouts at... Like, who the heck scouts the 4th base right now? I guess Has was worried that there might be more roaches hiding there, or maybe... Oh, a couple of roaches tried to scurry towards the left-hand side here. But I think he must have been worried to maybe see another hatchery there, or maybe a couple of units hiding. Oracle's, of course, very good at playing offensively, but it looks like Has for now is just simply saving up the energy. And he's trying to see if he can continue onwards, just simply accumulating that energy to deal with whatever push that Nerchio has planned. Now, supply-wise, right? Look at that supply count. There is no denying that Nerchio is extremely far ahead. Right? 20 supply, that's significant. A couple of queens now. Dude, what is this game? Nerchio moving across the map right now with a couple of the queens as well. They have a very long route ahead of them. I mean, they don't move particularly quickly. Then again, all they really need to do is get over here, right? A queen wins a one-on-one engagement against a couple of drone kills, by the way, right now coming up as well. But queens do win a one-on-one engagement. And a one-on-one engagement, a queen will win against a stalker. So as long as these queens make their way across, there's a very difficult... Like, this is a very difficult moment here for Has, actually. Yeah, he's gonna have to evacuate that. There's no way. Right? What exactly are you gonna do? Now, the Oracles are still going to town, though. They're picking up a lot of kills already. Great micro here, actually, by the Taiwanese Protoss player. Look at that. 2 additional drones there going down. Has, though, supply-wise, in a really awkward spot. He's effectively been reduced right now to 1 base play. Now, of course, when behind, Dark Shrine, always a good option. But I feel like Nerchio is going to be more than ready for that. Great timing there on that Lair Morphin. Obviously, he also has Spore Crawlers. He has one over here too, right? Yeah. He's got Spore Crawlers in every mineral line. And at this point, I really do favor Nerchio. Solid scouting here. He knows that his opponent has 3 hatchery, or rather 3 Nexi at this point. But he also knows about the fact that there is another Nexus now constructing, and the fact that Has is really only mining off of a single base. These corrosive biles actually now capable of landing on that Nexus, so I do think that that Nexus life is indeed gonna be numbered as well, with more and more biles landing, and queens shielding away right there, holding the watchtower. How often do you see queens holding watchtowers? Right? They're holding the watchtower nevertheless, and that gold base definitely will go down. Charge though, and ground weapons level 1 have been researched. Very nicely done. Now this is so interesting as well. Has actually warps in a couple of stalkers while finishing up charge. He doesn't have blink, but he does have some Dark Templar now currently morphing in as well. They're actually morphing in right here, closer towards that Zerg natural. They're gonna have to go after that Spore Crawler really aggressively if they want to try and pull this one off. Oracle's trying to bait away the majority of those queens. One of the DTs manages to get their way into that middle line. Another one instead just simply goes after the natural instead. But look at that, right? That's still a solid amount of workers though, right? Since they're one-shot drones, I mean, that is 10 drones! 10 drones for 2 Dark Templar? I mean, you don't even have to do the math for that. That is 100% worth it. And obviously, right, what Has is still doing is securing that newly acquired base, and he's setting himself up for maybe a 2-base all-in a little bit later. Still, Nerchio is not falling for that trap once again. He's following this up with more drones, actually going for melee upgrades. Very interesting there. I 100% would have expected by the way, the March of the Overlords. They're gonna go to every single base. I think that Overlord speed will be finishing up in just a bit as well. There we go. Nevertheless, Carapace about halfway done. He's gonna scout every single base here in just a bit, but I would have definitely expected missile upgrades at this point. Anyway, Nerchio not falling for that trap once again, like he did in game number 1. Going for additional droning here. It's the one thing that you usually want to do, even when you feel like you can win the game. When you're ahead, oftentimes your better option is to try and get more ahead instead. A lot of creep troopers out on the map already. I guess in the grand scheme of things, right? Nerchio is fine with his opponent having 2 bases. 2 base play from Protoss is not that scary, right? 2 base play is totally cool. Instead, he wants to probably push once he sees his opponent taking a 3rd. I think that's the main goal right now for our Zerg player. And there's no denying that Nerchio, he's playing this still very safely though, right? Only sitting on 55 drones on 3 bases is not a whole lot. He knows that this game has started off awkwardly, but he also knows that his opponent has been mining off of 1 base for a very long time. So every once in a while, he still squeezes out a couple of drones, but for the most part, it's just been a lot of units. Once again, though, going for +2 melee. So I don't think it was a mistake. No, instead he's gonna go now for the Baneling Nest. I wonder if he plans on maybe going for some Baneling drop play. +2 Banelings do one-shot probes. And so far, there hasn't really been a lot of research here as far as the armor upgrades and the shield upgrades and whatnot go for any of Has's army. 3rd base now being acquired though by Has. So we'll have to see right here whether or not Nerchio is gonna allow this from happening, or if he's just simply gonna allow Has to get that 3rd base up and running and to just simply maybe acquire a 4th and maybe even a 5th himself. Judging by the fact that right now we do see that 4th coming up, I think that Nerchio is gonna allow this. I think he's just simply gonna allow his opponent to take that base. He's gonna maybe harass it a little bit, but he knows that there's a good chance that Has has been making a lot of units here. And he also knows that he obviously really slowed down that Protoss economy anyway. 21 workers were killed though in the ground. Like, that's so strange, right? Judging by that Ravager aggression in the early part of this match, I would have really expected Nerchio to be the one that was ahead as far as worker kills go, but Has with the couple of drones here and there from the oracles, I mean that's 10 and 6 kills equivalent right here on both of these oracles, and obviously also the Dark Templar. It's still 23 worker kills there in the grand scheme of this game so far. That's a lot of queens, by the way, man. Jeez, that's a lot of queens. 2nd Evo Chamber now also coming up. Nerchio not going for any of the armor upgrades, instead just opting to go for melee and then also the missile upgrade, eventually. No carapace. Centrifugal hooks will be finishing up in just a little bit. Same for groove spines. So this is gonna be a hyper aggressive push. He's gonna let that base finish. He's gonna allow that base to finish. But he's still making a lot of units as well though here in the process. No Banelings morphed in just yet. I do think he wants to try and get some of those in just a little bit. Once again, by the way, a couple of drones did end up dying there. Quite surprised about that move out though. I really would have expected him to go for an all-out assault, maybe with Lingbane, Hydra, Roach. A couple of Ravages in there as well. A really sophisticated army composition. Going up against what looks like a standard comp, but this is very Zealot heavy. Looks like Has, in all of these games that I've seen so far, he's quite allergic to his 3rd and his 4th gas, right? Some people have got hay fever. Apparently Has has got gas fever or something like that. That's not really a thing, right? But I mean, most of the time, Protoss players really want to hoard the gas, because the more Archons you can make, and the more Immortals you have, and the more Carriers you get, and the more High Templar you have, the better your composition is gonna be. But oh my god! Okay, that was a Baneling-gasm. The Zerg player in me came out in just a little bit. I tried to be neutral, okay? I tried to be neutral, but that oh my god. All right, well, I mean, yeah, that is 24 Zealots that went down in total. Pretty sure that was about 20 or so that went down right there. And the Queen's coming up with the surround right now as well. Nerchio is closing in on his opposing army. That was an absolutely phenomenal hit. I think that explains why he decided to go for the +2 melee upgrade. Of course, Banelings do benefit from those melee upgrades, and Has, he's been run around, man, for the last 8 minutes or so. He is forced to GG out, and Nerchio, evens up the score. Alright, so I'm ready for a more Has-like game. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, right? He definitely does look pretty impressive as well when playing these super aggressive strategies. But the one thing that I've come to really like about Has's playstyle is this super aggressive cannon rush, you know, robotics facility, proxy, immortal juggling kind of, you know, strategy. I don't really know exactly if he plans on bringing it to this series as well. Obviously, he may very well have it planned for this particular map, and already with that pylon on the low ground, I'm curious to see if he's gonna follow this up with a gateway and then maybe a forge here in just a little bit. The first probe though, and that is gonna be a gateway, the first probe is now moving across the map. Now Nerchio sending a drone over towards the third base location. Huh. Oh, so I think what he wants, right? Yeah. So he's probably making the same assumption that his opponent is going to be capable of going for that proxy shenanigans on this particular map. The thing is, however, if they cannot rush this base, they've got this really strong front near your own ramp if you are the Zerg player, right? Where they can put shield batteries and photon cannons down, and you sort of get that, you know, offensive capability of first off killing the hatchery with a bunch of photon cannons, but then also the defensive fallback position where you can sort of like soft contain your opponent. Yeah, Has right now must know as well, judging by the timing of that gas and then also the spawning pool, that there is a hatchery up somewhere. He just doesn't know where it's located right now. Nerchio, with a really clever move, immediately makes the hatchery at the third base location. Now obviously this does mean that he's going to be quite vulnerable, in particular against two gateway based openers, but at this point it doesn't look like Has is going for anything along those lines. No, oh my god, that's super clever. I mean, for now though, I don't know if Has actually realizes what is going on here precisely. Yeah, Nerchio doesn't even really want to take the base yet. He needs to go for double queen first. Finally, Has will realize what exactly is going on. You would have imagined that he knew already by the fact that you know, spawning pool was super late, right? That base must have gone up. But anyways, that is a cheeky little move. I really like that. I believe I saw Cero do something similar as well, where he just simply went for his first hatchery at the third base location to make his opponent commit, right? Do you want to go ahead and cannon rush my base? That's cool, but then you're not gonna get to contain. And if you're gonna get to contain, you won't cannon rush my base. Protoss obviously can't really afford to do both at the same time. Super cheeky play there. I really like that. I wonder if that's actually the counter to maybe this style that Has likes to play. Just simply making your first hatchery at the third base. I mean, obviously it's gonna make the macro a little more difficult, and like I mentioned, in case of like double gateway openers and like 2 to 4 adepts, it gets very tricky, but none of that is going on right now. There's already a Twilight Council and then a robo facility coming up here for our Protoss player. Nicely done by Nerchio. Lots of mind games so far in this series though from both players, right? Nerchio making the assumption that his opponent is gonna go for that push. Has actually doesn't check the third base, and I wonder if that's mostly a mind game as well to make himself look a little bit weaker than he actually is. I can't imagine that he saw that timing of the spawning pool that late and then he you know, still thought that the natural would be coming up. I really don't think that's the case. Either way though, it looks like we are once again setting ourselves up for a game that looks very similar to game number 1. Now in game number 1, of course, Nerchio got carried away with making a lot of army, right? I actually would like it if he maybe makes a small group of Zerglings. He's only got 4 links right now. I think a couple of links are really good in, you know, the case of a couple of Stalkers or maybe some Zealots moving across the map as well. But Has once again going now for the Chrono Boost on the Observer, and then of course the Robotic Facility follow-up with the War Prism as well. So there's only 4 gateways here. No Dark Shrine, so I think this is once again gonna be, you know, that charge slot hit squad trying to kill any of those creep tumors. Now there's no connection with creep to the natural and the third base just yet for Nerchio. That's gonna make reinforcing anything a little bit harder, but this is gonna be a relatively small commitment though so far by Has. He's only got 4 gateways here. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a third base here within the next 30 seconds or so. A single Zergling already patrolling this area here as well, though obviously there's a chance that the third base gets acquired over on the left-hand side instead. Here we go though, Observer is currently scouting around. He realizes, hey, wait a second. There's like no army here just yet, and he is correct about that. 5 roaches are just about to spawn. Nerchio did just finish up his lair as well. He's going for 42 drones, and now he's going to start making a lot of roaches. Overseer now coming up as well, but Nerchio really not getting a whole lot of, not a whole lot of army just yet, although he does need to be careful. Losing one of those queens actually would be very, very painful. Roaches actually don't have speed just yet, and that's all of a sudden a lot of zealots. Right, they don't have any upgrades other than charge, of course, just yet, but with these units actually caught out, relatively out in the open, right, these zealots just simply charge forward, they kill 2 queens, and like 5 or so roaches already. That's a lot of units. That's a lot of units already, and Has actually is just simply gonna go after all of this army. He did move a probe over towards the 3rd base location right now too, so he's gonna be following this up with a more macro-focused style, but that's 9 drones, 4 gateways. This is just a classic 4-gate, right? Oh my god, Nerchio with the slight mispositioning. Has scouting ahead with the single observer, tries to figure out what is going on. I actually love this. Rather than going for additional economy, he's now just simply adding on 4 additional gateways here. Has wasn't planning to go for a 2-base all-in, but upon realizing that his opponent's, army and his queens were in a very vulnerable position, Has just simply went for it. That is 17 drones. That's ridiculous. Nerchio is going to follow this up with more workers right now, though, but he's definitely going to be caught with his pants down if he continues onwards with this. Now, so far, 3rd base hasn't been scouted by Nerchio. He may have spotted the probe there, moving over towards this location, although I'm not entirely sure. But look, he's followed it up with additional immortals, and he's now just simply going to go for an all-out assault. Yeah. Oh, man, this is the kind of moment where you feel terrible if you're the Zerg player. Couple of roaches look like they may very well want to go for a bit of a run by. I like the idea of that, but obviously Nerchio sees all of this army moving out, and if these roaches are on the side of the Protoss, that does mean, and right now they're gonna go onto the creep as well, but it does mean that there are far less defensive units here available at home. Roaches do manage to make their way straight into the natural of the Protoss player. Nerchio is gonna try and maybe force this Protoss to turn back around, but already a lot of zealots are being warped in. At the same time, the Immortal Zealot Sentry Ball has arrived on the other side of the map. These units are going to be able to deal a huge amount of damage, and rather than killing the 3rd base, Has immediately jumps into the natural. More and more zealots are being warped in, and eventually, right, these roaches and that one Ravager, they're definitely going to have to pay for the shenanigans with their life. And I mean, I think that the War Prism actually ended up dying here, but Has still has so many units available. He's clearing out practically everything. Sure, that's 7 probes going down, but that is not enough damage to justify that, and Has obtains the victory here in game number 3. Really do have to compliment Has there on his super quick decision making, right? I mean, that wasn't quite what I expected there. Nerchio was already making a lot of roaches. I really felt like he was in a good spot, but with that super rapid warp in there of Has, and these queens and these roaches forced to run around, right? That's really what cost him the game there. He didn't have any Zerglings tanking for the roaches, and that means that you really need to have your roaches in a perfect position, because if the charge lords just simply charge at them, right, which is kind of what they do, they just simply connect so very easily, and if then your roaches are out in the open and you don't have any mineral patches to hug and you don't really have any way of reducing that service area, I really favor our Protoss player in that kind of scenario. But I have to compliment Has there on that super quick decision making. Really rapid move there, really good decision once again. Now Nerchio, I mean, I also like the fact that Nerchio is going for these really weird styles though. I wonder if he's mentally gonna be in a bit of a tough spot there, because I've seen him play miles better than he did there in that last one. Just a very slight error, and that's kind of the edge that Has requires. But he's already going for a base here in a location that is Has. It's very unlikely that Has is gonna scout this, right? You either take it as your 3rd base, but you never really take the one over here, close on the right-hand side of the screen. And Has indeed is gonna now move over to the 3rd location, and he will also find out that that's not the case. Maybe this is meant to trigger an overreaction from Has, because obviously while there has been a lot of cheese here from our Protoss player, Nerchio hasn't really shown anything super aggressive just yet, other than I guess on Redshift, where he went for those couple of roaches relatively early on into the game, but that wasn't really an all-in either. Right now this could mean that there is a hatchery maybe out over here or out over here. practically impossible for Protoss to scout at this point, and it will force Has in a much more defensive position. I like the idea of what Nerchio is doing, right? I like the fact that he's trying to make Has feel uncomfortable and therefore not play the early game that he is, you know, usually known for playing. I mean, we haven't even really seen a cannon rush in this series just yet. Right, I still hope that it's gonna come. Although I don't know if it's gonna be the case. Obviously, if Has wins this one, that is gonna be the end of the series, and it doesn't look like there's gonna be a cannon rush in this particular match either. But I really do like the fact that Nerchio is going for the way, or going for the style that he's playing so far. Now, this has been spotted just now by Has, though, right? And I wonder how much experience Nerchio has playing from this position, because while at this point there are definitely some advantages of having your hatchery over here, like for example confusing your opponent and then preventing him from going for that cannon rush, effectively shutting it down before it even starts. There's no denying that this is also very vulnerable, right? What if these rocks go down and Has is going to be able to just, you know, spend an additional 10 or so seconds killing this base? What if, for example, the creep spread is not going to be sufficient? I mean, you can sure spread creep on the right-hand side of the map, but that's going to leave the left-hand side very vulnerable, and that makes expanding towards a fourth base and whatnot very difficult. Whereas Has, I mean, he's not really at a disadvantage right now, right? He's in a pretty good spot. Now these Zerglings, they're actually going to be a bit of a nuisance. There's no shield battery here near the front. Oh, this is actually not bad. This is actually not good. Has may very well end up losing this one Stalker here near the front with just a handful more Zerglings right now. Up at this point, or up until this point rather, Nerchio has just been making about 4 Zerglings. Right now he gets just a handful more. I do think though with this Adept coming out that Has is going to be able to defend that, in particular with the shield battery already up, but there's no denying that these Zerglings are dealing quite a bit of damage here already to the Cybercore, but nicely done there by Has. Solid critical timing right there and great crisis management as well. Now obviously with Nerchio making this many Zerglings, he's slowing down his eco once again. He's slowing down his economy once again, right? Going for the Roachborn pretty early on once more. Is he going for the lair? Yeah, he is just playing this as if it is a relatively normal game here. But he is forced to go for those additional queens. So already he's going to go up to 5 queens here. I think that's mostly due to the fact that he needs a lot of creep spread. He's also, look at that, right? He's also not going to fall for any of that mind game shenanigans once again. Sending Zerglings pretty much everywhere, just scouting for proxies, just to make sure that there's nothing out of the ordinary. Well, once again, Has not really showing any variety just yet, right? Going for a bunch of additional gateways, going for a War Prism into that Observer, and then of course also a bunch of Zealots with charge. Now there is a Dark Shrine now. This one has not been spotted just yet. Although I have to be honest, Nerchio has been on point with his Spore Crawlers and then also his Overseer timing, at least in all of the previous games. He doesn't have an Overseer just yet, but either way, I think that he's still going to be able to make one here in a moment's notice. You should still not deal all too much damage. The question is, right, do you want to knock down these rocks yourself and then, like, lock yourself out temporarily and then knock them down again so it can't hurt you later on into the game? I'm not gonna lie, as someone who plays a lot of StarCraft, these rock towers always give me anxiety if I'm forced to take my base in this position. It's pretty scary. A couple of Zerglings now, though, made their way across the map. They're going to scout out the timing of this third base, or at the very least the attempted third base. Nice Zergling snipe there, or I guess nice snipe there by the Zerglings on that probe that was ready to take down that third base on position. That does mean that it will be delayed for just a little while, but we are definitely now forcing ourselves into a more macro-focused strategy. This is the kind of game where I definitely do like the position for Nerchio, but already, I mentioned the Dark Templar earlier, right? They were perfectly countered in game, I think that was game 2, and they still got like 10 drone kills. That's way too much. Really not where you want to be. Now, there is an Overseer available now. All of the roaches actually grouping up together, so that one definitely will go down. 2 drones here in total. Much better control here by Nerchio already. The one Dark Templar, though, once again trying to be a nuisance. The War Prism now chasing it around as well, sort of giving away that position. A couple of Zealots tried to go for some aggression here as well, but it does look like they will be cleaned up relatively easily as well. And Nerchio managed to deflect all of this. Now, during all of this, Nerchio has just been making non-stop roaches. He's got a small hit squad of units here at home to deal with any kind of proper warpins, but he's now also going for an all-out roach assault. This is unupgraded, no missile upgrades or whatever, just a couple of roaches and ravagers, and roaches do have their glio reconstitution, their speed upgrade, but this is one of the most classic Zerg-based pushes. I would actually love it if Nerchio commits right now. He may just warp around and go to the natural instead. I wouldn't necessarily mind that. Still, the Warm War Prism, though, is still buying a bunch of time. Although I think it may have actually gotten sniped just now. Yeah. I think actually that's the reason why Nerchio decided to go back. He sniped the War Prism. He knew that his push was already a little bit delayed because he was occupied trying to deal with that one. But at the very least, right at this point, he's going to be capable of doing whatever he likes. At this point, it is very much so the Zerg player who gets to be in charge of this match. Also now going for the Roach Baneling style, I quite like this. Rather than going for the later Roach Warren, or rather the later Baneling Nest and going up to Hydra Bane first, or Hydralisk and then Banelings first, we now see Roaches being accompanied with Banelings much earlier on into the game. I don't necessarily think they need their Roach, or rather their melee upgrade either. Just Glio Constitution is really nice, and then having a couple of roaches available, even just going heavy Ling Bane is not a bad option, but just having a couple of roaches and then a couple of Banelings is a really good army against pretty much everything that has been showing us so far. Another thing that I actually would really like to see players experiment with when it comes to fighting against this kind of army is Banelings inside of Overlords. I know that was a very common thing back in the day, but one thing that Has is skipping out on in all of those games is Blink. Right, one of the classic things that a lot of Zerg players, or rather a lot of Protoss players do is they go for charge first and then into Blink, or Blink first and then into charge. Whichever one you get first, you get the other one afterwards. Obviously, there's very little anti-air here for our Protoss player just yet. Well, here we go. There is certainly a lot of, oh my god, there certainly is a lot of Protoss available, but here a lot of Zerg as well. Nerchio showing the Banelings right now. They already got some really good connections, right? And these Banelings, they are worth their weight in gold when they can kill these charging zealots. One of the rules of the Baneling is that you want to morph in new ones when you are just about to use them, and that's exactly what Nerchio is doing. Already killing so many of those zealots, and all of a sudden, right, that seems to absolutely shut down everything that has here at this point in the game, murdering practically all of those units right now. And while the two Immortals there do get picked up inside of that War Prism, Nerchio definitely is making himself ready to go on the offensive. Reinforcing units and the Queens should be more than enough to deal with this Prism. Nerchio gonna try and snipe that Prism immediately. Has recognizes that it is overextending. And with that, Nerchio evens up the score, and that means we are going into our final match. Alright, so here we go. Final map of this series is a Lost and Found LE. Now, if the previous games are anything to go off of, even if Lost and Found LE is usually a macro-focused map, this may very well be something a little bit more aggressive too. I mean, I'm not gonna lie though, I like the way that Has is playing. I think he's very good at reading scenarios and responding to what his opponent is doing. It doesn't look like he really needs to think about any of his responses just because he's been in every scenario what seems to be 1,000 times, and then he's just simply immediately changing up his playstyle to suit the scenario at hand. But I do feel like his playstyle is a little predictable. Right? Like, there's a lot of strategies that he likes to play, and I feel like while people may have very well been able to figure out how to counter that, you know, that shenanigans with the photon cannons and then the immortal juggling and all that, just by simply taking the third base as their natural, right? Or I guess the third base is their very first expansion. I do feel like the other strategy is something that players will figure out when they check out these replays. There's no denying that Has is looking really powerful in these kind of games, but I mean, judging by the fact that Nerchio managed to deal with the aggression super cleanly, right, in game 4, I feel like that's how a lot of the games in the future are gonna go if Has keeps playing the same styles that he has been playing so far in these games as well. The games that I've seen him play, he likes to go for a lot of aggressive strategies, but he's really quite vulnerable to, for example, Banelings, to, for example, drop play, to, for example, Mutalisk play as well. Basically anything that flies, right? He's got no anti-air whatsoever. And where a lot of players are still trying to defend it right now with just the good old Roach Ravager kind of armies, I really do feel like there's a lot of potential in playing something like, for example, Mutas, or for example, you know, even Ling Bane. Just +1 attack Ling Bane It used to be very popular back in the day, just going Zerglings and Banelings and a bunch of Queens with +1 melee really early on. They're absolutely phenomenal at dealing with these kind of army compositions. Obviously, they have weaknesses as well, right? And the mid-game transitions get a little bit awkward. But I do feel like what Has is doing with only 2 gases, it is something that's relatively easy to counter if you're not, you know, forced to deal, or if you're not forced to deal with, for example, Archon, right? Link Bane is absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal in shutting this one down. Anyways, I'm curious to see how players are going to approach Has in upcoming tournaments as well, because there's no denying he was very, very good at Valencia, and he's been very impressive so far in 2018, but I really do feel like this is one of those strategies that can be cracked. Now, obviously, there are other players out there as well that are a little predictable. Obviously, the word predictable and innovation do come to mind. I've always kind of called innovation a predictable player. But he's predictable in a completely different way in the fact that he's just extremely good at playing that macro game, right? Making him one of the greatest Terran players of all time. It's much harder to counter, right? Whereas if you only play a handful of strategies, obviously that's something that you can pick up on if you are an opponent. For example, right? Say you're a Zerg, and you go first 100 gas, Zerging speed, second 100 gas, Overlord speed. You confirm the amount of gas that Protoss is mining on, and you try and figure out what it is they're going for. Then as a follow-up, you go for the Lara and the +1 melee upgrade. I think there's a lot of potential in a strategy like that. Now, so far, obviously, we haven't seen anything along those lines yet. But I really do feel like it's one of those nuts that will be cracked within the next couple of tournaments. But we'll see. Obviously, only time will tell. Obviously, Has knows this as well, right? That his strategy is counterable. And he's perfectly capable of adjusting. But I do think that Has is forced to, you know, either transition into a more like, quote-unquote, macro-focused Protoss player if he wants to keep up with this kind of shenanigans. Just because of the fact that I feel like players are going to catch on to it rather easily and then counter all of his strategies accordingly. Let me know down below in the comment section if you actually think along those lines as well. Because we've seen a lot of players in the past that play these super aggressive strategies. Then it takes a while for their opponents to figure out the proper counter. But then once they do, it just gets shut down. And there's really no room anymore for that strategy to work. And I really feel like you do have to, you know, progress, I guess, as a player in order to stay up to date. And judging by the fact that Has is playing a lot of the same strategies, it becomes very difficult to, you know, transition away from that. Maybe he's already doing so, though, because obviously he has been showing a lot of 3-base play in this series already. He is playing his own styles. Ugh, hitting a supply block here. I think the nerves may very well be getting to him for just a little bit. But now he's playing a more or less standard Zerg style. Nerchio, once again, though, going for an awful lot of roaches. He's doing a lot more roach play than he normally would. Having so many queens out on the board as well, only 40 drones. That's nothing. Actually, I wonder if he's maybe getting a little bit too carried away here with playing defensively, because Has did decide to go for the third Nexus. I love this from him. He's playing to an image, right? And that's super smart. That's the one thing I really like about playing so aggressively. Whenever you play super aggressively, you can just play to an image a little while later. Because right now, he's playing something very similar to game number 1. And in game number 1, he managed to obviously counter Nerchio very easily. Because once again, Nerchio is now sitting on a very large amount of units that he's not really capable of using for another little while. He's now going to follow it up with drones already. But ideally, you sit on 66 drones as Zerg before you start making any of these units here in the first place. Well, the third Nexus is now coming up. Still no double gas taken here by Has, even though he's got more than enough probes here in that natural mineral line. Judging by the fact, though, that there are once again a lot of gateways coming up, I do think that Has is planning to go for that aggression with the Zealots here in just a little bit. Bailing Nest coming up right now for Nerchio. I really do like that. What I don't like, though, is the amount of economy that he has. The fact of the matter is that he's you know, forced to deal with a lot of these Zealots, but you don't really need, you know, 15 roaches to deal with a handful of Zealots, right? Obviously, you have to always be careful of the warp in, but the longer that you don't have drones mining, the more ahead your opponent is going to get. Should we have a look at the income right now? Yeah, mineral-wise, Has is getting quite a lot more minerals, right? And all of these resources are going to be spent on Zealots in just a little bit. There are now additional roaches coming up as well. So that's 12 more roaches, but Has is still ahead here, economically speaking. And in the end, the eco game is absolutely critical. Now, a lot of roaches, or a lot of Zealots here, man. That's actually a big commitment. Has now showing us that he is once again going for that big push. He's also, more importantly, showing Nerchio that. Nerchio does not know about these zealots here on the right-hand side. Nerchio actually now forced out onto the map. Has once again playing that mind game brilliantly, forcing his opponent to split up a lot of these armies. And then all of a sudden, these roaches get towards the natural, and that's when the main army shoves forward as well. That means that a lot of this army will be split up. Sure, the zealots will be picked off, but at the same time, right, the third base is in a world of hurt. Zealots will be able to take quite a few hits there from that army. Nice movement actually there by Nerchio, deflecting a lot of these armies here for the time being as well, and just simply making this easier. But that's 8 drones going down for a relatively small commitment amount of zealots. And there we go, 8 additional zealots now coming up as well. Has is smelling blood. He wants to clear out this game right here, right now. Playing these mind games brilliantly is our Protoss player from Taiwan, and I have to be honest, man, I'm really quite impressed with the way that he's moving around. Sure, he may be predictable. Sure, what I said may be true, that players will figure out how to counter this properly over the next couple of months. But as it is right now, it looks like these strategies are working out absolutely phenomenally. He's just warping in more and more. Well, he does need to be careful. Woo! War Prism actually could have gone down there. Slight mispositioning on those corrosive biles by Nerchio. It does look like eventually this will go down and mass recall will be forced. But look at the eco count. Look at it. 33 drones versus 55 probes. While this was all going on, Has has just been making more and more and more immortals, and then also following it up with a lot of those zealots. Can he just continue the aggression right now? Will he transition towards a 4th? Does he need to? I wouldn't even mind it if he puts down a 2nd robo and a 4th at this point and just keep on playing Immortals and Zealots, right? Because while the Banelings definitely have a lot of potential, that's smart play there, right? Forcing Nerchio to try and use Banelings here to intercept these running by Zealots. It basically made it so that the main chunk of that Protoss army was just moving onto the creep, and that was a lot of lost economy there by Nerchio. Such a cheeky player, right? So basically, he scurried along the edge of the creep there, making it look as if it was just a casual rally on that War Prism, but it wasn't, obviously. He wanted his opponent to see that there were a lot of units, or he didn't want his opponent to see, obviously, there were a lot of units there, but the War Prism was heading up to the left-hand side of the map. Once again, though, here we go. Zealots splitting themselves off from the rest of the party. That means that these Banelings, once again, will be left vulnerable in that third base. I don't think it is destined to live for that much longer. What so far Has is not target firing it down just yet, but that base certainly will not live for longer than this engagement. There we go. It will be picked off. At the same time, still a small group of zealots is moving on the right-hand side of the screen. Nerchio is losing his very first hatchery that he created. He's now going to try and make another one right here on the right-hand side. Still, Has needs to be careful. He cannot overextend. A couple of properly landed biles can easily close this one out as well. 2 War Prisms. I love it. Double War Prism is super good. Both of them are going to warp in a lot of units. That means that, once again, Nerchio will be forced to split off some of this army. Still, with proper corrosive biles, though, this can end in just a moment's notice. But look at this. Forcing that Zerg army to be split up, and these Immortals, man, that's 5 Immortals. 5 Immortals absolutely plow through roaches like a hot knife through butter. They will be able to kill these units with just a moment's notice, and more Zealots are warping in. More and more of these army units, man, they're forced to split off, and Nerchio GG's out. Our veteran Zerg player just got mind-gamed by our Taiwanese Protoss. Now, I hope that Has is going to be able to continue developing his playstyle over the next couple of months, because I do feel like players are going to be able to figure out his tricks. But for now, it works like an absolute charm. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. Special shout out to the Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. But I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you once again in the next one.